Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we're going to talk about recognizing the abundance that surrounds us and using it to serve others in order to, plain and simply, help make the world a better place. Our guest is a true hero, and he's on his own hero's journey. Brad Israel from Mobile, Alabama is with us today. Brad is the president and founder of Warrior 360, a leadership development company focused on coaching and consulting with businesses and teams. His work stems from 14 years of dedicated military service. On September 11th, 2001, Brad heard his call to adventure, and he followed through by joining the United States Army. In his time there, he became an Army Ranger, a combat commander, and a Green Beret. And he served in combat on multiple deployments to Afghanistan during Operation Enduring Freedom. And while Brad's story is filled with bravery and courage, leadership, and a sense of duty, what is most inspiring to me is his attitude of abundance and gratitude, and how even in the face of adversity, he shared these incredible gifts with others. Friends, get ready to be wowed and inspired. And Brad, welcome to the campfire.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I look forward to our conversation this morning.
I am so excited, and I just want to start off with a huge thank you for your service.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so Brad, your story, we're going to start with you as a sophomore in college on 9/11 and how this all unfolds for you and this desire to join the Army. And I wonder if we could just jump right in there.
Yeah, that was many years ago, and it really was. It was that one of many decisive moments in my life that I would say I kind of had a pretty clear understanding of I needed to go do this. It had never really crossed my mind. I'd grown up playing sports and was competitive in football and loved the competition aspect of things. But when that happened, it just really struck a chord, like it did with so many in our country, and sent me on this journey of self-reflection to really look under the hood and see who was I and what did I have to offer. And that's kind of what I would say sent me on this research, and wanted to meet as many people that had graduated from Hampton-Sydney College, where I was in school, that had gone into the service, so that I could start to understand and appreciate their stories, and then see what commonalities I had as I was narrowing my list on wanting to go into the Army. And we had a great mentor up there, General Sam Wilson, that had just deeply impacted countless number of men that ended up going on to graduate from there. And he was like a grandfather to me, and he took me under his wing and really taught me an enormous amount too. But that was where it all started, was when that happened that morning. I was a sophomore sitting in a psychology class. And so for sure the flame was lit, and I knew that at that point I wasn't going to want to go just do the typical route and go to college and then go right into business or whatever I was kind of being pushed into, because I didn't have a clear vision on what was next. And then this was it.
Yeah, I wonder. So a lot of this podcast is kind of modeled after this concept of the hero's journey, and it starts with this call to adventure. And I didn't mention in the intro, and I should have, you have an incredible TED Talk, and would love to direct people to go check out your TED Talk. One of the things in your TED Talk that you said was that event, 9/11, ignited a flame in you that made you want to serve. And to me, it's like, that's that call to adventure, this flame that was ignited. And you just used that word flame again a second ago. So I wonder if you could just tell us what was it like sitting in that psychology class, or just that sort of general time period what did that flame feel like? Like, was there emotion that came with it? Was there anger? Was there, I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that flame.
For sure, that there was definitely emotion, and I think where General Sam played such a critical role in my life was that you need to be able to take a step back from the emotion and try. Everything we do is got an emotional context to it, but then can you run it through the logical, the more rational part of your brain too? Because the reality is that emotion, to go make an enormous commitment like that with your life, if that's that the minute you hit adversity in the military, that could quickly change. And so you've got to really understand what you're getting yourself into and the sacrifice that you're about to make and the discipline required behind that sacrifice in order to see that all the way through. And so I think he was there to kind of temper my emotions with, you need to think of this holistically all the way through with why is it that you want to go do it. And I would also share with others that experience things and whatever it is that they want to pursue, especially in in the call to adventure, in the hero's journey. Sometimes these things will pull at us, and we will try to talk ourselves out of it.
Mhm.
But in your mind, you have clarity with what you need to do and what the next step is. And then it's just having the courage sometimes to take that step. And
Yeah,
for me,
absolutely.
that was because I did. I mean, I remember I talked to my parents, and my grandfathers had both served, but then there was a generational skip, and so they were never saying you don't need to go do this, but they were certainly, I mean, as I would be if my any of my three young boys wanted to go follow in my footsteps. I mean, they were certainly concerned for my well being and said, tell me where you're coming from. What is this? And have you looked at other options? There's other ways to serve. And so they and many others, friends as well, were certainly asking and questioning my decision making. But you just kind of have to follow what's innately in all of us and trust your gut in those moments, not to go do it haphazardly, but say, okay, if this is my direction of travel, I need to arm myself with as much information as possible so that I know what I'm walking into. Because you're never going to be able to control all of that, but you can at least influence some of the variables that go into your decision making process or matrix or however you do it. But that was the big thing for me is I couldn't deny what I was feeling and the clarity that I did have inside, even if I couldn't articulate it at the time.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I love that, it seems like there's like a powerful, like emotional force that is kind of pulling you, but then the rational decision making around like whether this is the right thing. I wonder like what were some of the emotions that fueled this for you?
I mean, at first it was anger.
Mhm.
It was just the fact that our way of life had been disrupted, and I feel at my core there's a there's a part of me that likes to identify with being a protector and
Mm.
not wanting to see others be harmed, especially innocent folks be harmed, and so I think that just further uh, crystallized it for me. But yeah, there was a wave of emotions. I mean, it was the anger, just the not understanding why such savages could want to go do something like that, and then again for me it was then getting clarity of thought with okay now it's I've got to transition the anger into fuel for
Yes.
what's next because you can't just go off of anger or you'll be reckless. So
Yeah.
and it wasn't to go out to necessarily seek revenge as much as it was to stand up for our ideals and principles of what it is to live in a free society and to represent a democracy. And so, and be able to hopefully impart that upon others in other parts of the world that want to share those ideals and principles with us.
Yeah. You and I have only spoken a couple of times, but what you said about just that feeling of being a protector, like I see that in you very clearly. Like that's pretty cool that you let that come out. For listeners and for me, really, like contextually, can you tell us a little bit about Brad before that moment? Maybe
Yeah,
upbringing, like, and kind of what got you to that point.
So certainly a pretty carefree, very privileged upbringing, wonderful, loving, values-based parents that raised us here on the Gulf Coast, and had an older brother, a younger sister. We went to a great private school where my kids are now. That's kindergarten through 12th grade. So great sense of community, and played sports. Really into football more than anything else, and so, I'd been a little bit, I would say, on easy street in regards to had opportunities that not everybody had, and also that was one of those reflective moments. Was, who was I? And I got to go to this school growing up, and then I got the opportunity to go to college, and to a pretty prestigious college at that, and so all those things kind of compounded to helped me realize that it was also part of my responsibility to pay it forward. And so when we were talking about abundance, I mean, I grew up with that around me. I didn't have a need or want, and I love building relationships with others. And so taking all that and saying, okay, how can I package this to then be able to go pour into those that maybe don't have the similar upbringing, environment, experiences, loved ones that were looking out for them and providing for them the way that I did. And so that was as I started to form more of that idea in college. But yeah, I mean, I very social. I mean, always wanted to go out with friends and to go and do adventures, and studied in Australia and did a study abroad trip in Central Europe. And so I mean, I loved being out there and experiencing new things. And that was kind of up to that point of my life what I'd done, and where I'd thrived. And so that's, I mean, that's a little bit about my upbringing. The Gulf Coast is a great place to raise a family, and that's what attracted us back here so many years later. And yeah, and just love everything I got to experience growing up. I have no regrets in regards to just the opportunities that I had.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you had almost a, you recognize the abundance that you had, and you talk about that in your TED talk. We're going to get into that a little bit more, but it sounds like this event happened on September 11th that maybe caused you to feel a greater sense of gratitude for the abundance that you had, and sparked this sort of sense of responsibility to go do something for people that didn't have that abundance that you had. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that my parents certainly helped shape my siblings and I in regards to always being grateful, and for wanting to give back, and for understanding that the things that we were fortunate enough to have were because of the hard work, the sacrifice, all those things that go into it, and it's not just to be expected.
Mhm.
But it certainly did that beyond the framework and the walls of what I was accustomed to, the people that I was exposed to. Because when you go into the military, you're with all walks of life and all different experiences, different cultures, ethnicities, all of that. But the common denominator is just how we are, and seeking connection as human beings. And so
Yeah.
being able to meet people where they are, I think, was a big part too of, you're not coming in with these preconceived notions, and trying to be super critical or judgmental because somebody didn't grow up or understand or have the values or the manners or the acumen or whatever you want to throw in there that you or people you looked up to did. It was more, okay, how can I understand them and connect with them, so that as we walk forward together, we can get better, we can improve, we can create a high performance organization. And I'd say that we were successful at doing that across the board, by, with, and through the buy-in and the beliefs that we shared once we established trust in that relationship. But certainly, um, the gratitude and being grateful, especially when you're at a college like Hampton Sydney, it could easily be lost on you because you just have things that are expected. And so
Yeah.
you have to take a step back and just say, not everybody gets to do these types of things. Not everybody gets an education like that. So
Yeah.
what an opportunity for us.
I'm wondering, like, the word fairness is coming to me right now. Like, was there this feeling of like, this isn't fair? These people shouldn't have to go through this. Like, I have all of this abundance and this is happening in the world. Like, I'm just curious, did that play a part?
I don't know. I wouldn't say fairness as much as how do you help people actualize, and how do you help them see that just because they may come from one experience growing up or one stereotype doesn't mean that that has to be the shackles that they wear for the rest of their life. Because there's been so many stories in our civilization of people that have come out of poverty or that have conquered whatever demons that they had to wrestle with and come out victorious on the other side. And so I think it's more helping them understand that and not subscribe to the victim mindset, but more from the warrior's mindset of, okay, what do I need to do to be able to control the things that I can control, which a lot of it starts with my beliefs and my self-talk, and then the impact that I'm having for myself and for others, and how that's going to affect our team, how that's going to affect me and my long-term outcomes. And so, it wasn't. I mean, the cliche of life isn't fair is certainly true. And so, I mean, I think if you buy into that, you can start really trying to subscribe more to the victimhood that a lot of our society believes in, versus, okay, well, what do I need to do to change the outcomes, versus just, kind of being a passive observer and subscribing to apathy more than action.
Yeah. Well, you certainly took action, joined the Army, become an Army Ranger, combat commander, Green Beret. And what we're going to get into your story of abundance and how you turned abundance into an igniter of compassion. And that's really the essence of what I want to get to. But on that journey and on the way to that, you experienced a lot of adversity. You're in combat. In your TED talk, you talk about this ambush that you found yourself in this valley. I wonder if you could just to create some context for our listeners, if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean that was the we had been in some small sporadic engagements up to that point, and we had rockets and mortars lobbed at us and at our base where we were living. But we were trying to identify a location for a combat outpost on the Pakistan border, because that was a mountainous area. We were probably about 8,000 to 9,000 feet in elevation. It was pretty dense, heavily wooded, and the roads were dried out riverbeds called wadis that led you across the border. It was a porous border, and so a lot of times your Al Qaeda network, your HIG, your Haqqani fighters were finding safe haven and sanctuary in Pakistan, and going right under the nose of the Pakistani military checkpoints to come across to engage with us, or to go wreak havoc in the villages. And we were trying to find a suitable location to put a combat outpost where we could observe the border crossing. And we had been unsuccessful that morning. We had a long convoy. The problem with those dried out riverbeds is, as you can imagine, the rivers aren't on top of the mountains. The rivers are down in the valley floor. So now you've got high ground all around you, and pretty significant high ground with, some rock faces and cliffs and a lot of trees and a lot of great concealment for the enemy to be able to hide in. And so we had come out of one valley and we were entering another to see if we could identify a spot. And those types of missions, you're really a sitting duck unless you've got close air support on station, or you've got some helicopters that can kind of provide your overwatch. And if I'm the enemy, all I've got to do is sit at the entrance or the mouth of that valley and count your vehicles coming in and say, okay, we've got 8 vehicles coming in. There's one way in, there's one way out. So let's initiate our assault, our ambush at this juncture. And so it was, looking back on it, it wasn't surprising from the advantageous terrain that the enemy had, but it was surreal, because that was probably the first moment where it was an overwhelming barrage of firepower initiated with rocket propelled grenades that were raining down on us. And you had that thought in your head, good Lord, they're really trying to kill us. And, you'd obviously been through training at this point. You've been through live fire exercises, and we had been in country for not even 3 or 4 weeks, probably 3.5 weeks at this point. But that for me was kind of a wake up of, yeah, absolutely, it's game on. That's what they're here to do, is they're here to find, fix, and destroy you, just like you are to them. And so it changed the way that I looked at that for the rest of my time, any mission I went on or any deployment. But we found ourselves where they tried to box in our front vehicle and our trail vehicle, because if they could disable those, then they had us in the kill zone, and they were machine gun fire, small arms fire from our front. So at our 12 o'clock, and then from our 3 o'clock and our 9 o'clock. And thankfully they were not able to disable our vehicles. We were able to push through the kill zone, which is what we did as we returned fire. But when you've only got a small amount of vehicles and everybody else is inside the up armor, you're only returning fire with one weapon system per vehicle. So you've got 240 Bravos, you've got Mark 19 grenade launchers, and you had 50 cal machine guns. Well, our gunner on the rear vehicle got hit with shrapnel and kind of peppered him down the side of his face and neck, which caused a lot of superficial wounds. But at the time, you didn't know that, and a lot of bleeding. And so he drops down. So now we're down a vehicle. Our sister platoon is not close enough where they can engage yet, because they're still entering the valley, entering the mountain pass from the valley floor. So we find ourselves boxed in, and we pushed through the kill zone. And then the first thing we did was made the call to get guys out of the vehicles and let's climb the high ground. Because the one thing I know about the enemy that we faced is, even though they're uneducated, they're savvy and masterful tacticians, because they're survivors. They've been doing this for their entire life. Their lifetime, their civilization is, if they had a water dispute, then it would turn into a war. And so because they're survivors in the Darwinian sense, they also knew that the odds started to shift in our favor once we had people, soldiers, warriors, getting out of the vehicles and climbing the high ground and using tactical movement to go engage them with the overwatch of our trucks. So they quickly broke contact after we started to get up there and meet them at their level to be able to engage them. And we did get close air support on station. We were able to cut off their exfil back to Pakistan and drop some pretty big ordnance on them, and we were able to live to fight another day. But our trucks were limping back in there with busted windshields and tires shot out and bullet holes all riddled throughout them. And that was one of those, probably by the grace of God and a lot of prayers too, that we didn't find ourselves with a lot more casualties than just our one wounded, who ended up coming back and joining us too. So yeah, it was intense. I mean, and that kind of set the conditions for my mind to recognize that you're always going to have fear in those moments, but you got to be able to act and push through it regardless. And so critical how we fall back on training, because it becomes instinctual, and then you don't have to think, you just have to do. And for a lot of us, you can get frozen in the moment. I remember my gunner was a young guy, and he was a private. And as we got into that, he looks down at me and said, "Sir, they're shooting at us." I was like, I said some choice words and told him to return fire, because it was one of those moments. He was probably feeling the same way. He was saying, "Oh my God, here we are. I've had drill sergeants standing over me my entire career up to this point, telling me what to shoot at and what not to shoot at. And now I've got to be making that decision and engaging targets as they present themselves, which are real human beings."
It's real. Like, one thing I noticed in your TED talk that just struck me, like, just kind of recapping what you just said, you mentioned, like, when it first started happening, you felt like time stopped, but then you realized and you knew that you had to step into action. And then I think, as you were kind of explaining the experience, like, this whole thing leveled up your confidence and your team's confidence, and you all grew out of this.
Yes, for sure. And that's such a big thing too. I mean, and I think that's a big thing in leadership, is it's what people look for, is confidence in their leader. And I think it's balanced with a good dose of humility, so that you're not seen as arrogant. And that's one thing I wanted to make sure too, because just because we survived that one didn't mean that we were bulletproof, because I lost a lot of good friends that I considered bulletproof. And so it was, how do you balance that and learn from it? We was like, okay, let's create some truths. A few are is we're never going to drive into an area where we can't have the tactical advantage with the high ground. And that either means getting out of the vehicles and walking it. And if it takes multiple days, then so be it. Or making sure that we've got close combat attack helicopters on station or close air support on station. Make sure we've got good comms, because that was the other thing, is our communications were terrible. You'd have to get out the satellite antenna, which we couldn't do at that time, to be able to relay back to our higher headquarters to let them know what was going on. And so all those things became part of it. But yeah, it was definitely clarity for us and provided confidence going forward. But one of those moments that you had to learn and grow from, and not get blind confidence with what you were doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the part of the story where, you know, you're facing some really, really harsh adversarial conditions. And I just want to kind of demonstrate that for listeners, because the next part of our story is more the heartwarming piece, honestly, and the part that really inspires me. But it, you know, I think it's important for us to understand, like, again, the conditions that you were in, right? But the story kind of changes a little bit when you've got this great team. You guys have built up this confidence and have been able to withstand these tough conditions. But then you're transferred to another team. You're transferred to lead another team, and this is where kind of the second part of our story about abundance comes in. And so I wonder if you could just kind of take it from there and walk us through this this way in which the abundance that you had growing up becomes something that you're able to share and turn into a compassion.
Yeah, and let's first let me own the part of the story where I was moping because I was, voluntold that I was leaving my platoon that we had helped build into this high functioning organization, and and had gotten them to a point where I felt so good about, that I didn't get to reap the rewards of being with
Mm.
them for the rest of the deployment. And that was really hard. And I tried to resist the opportunity that the colonel was giving me, the battalion commander at the time. And he said, I understand and I acknowledge all that, and I can relate. However, you'll have your bags packed, and we've got a helicopter inbound to come get you, and you're heading out to Gamal, which was a different area. And all I knew about Delta Company was that they were considered the where everybody sent a lot of their soldiers that they didn't want, which was a horrible stereotype for that organization, because it wasn't true. But when they were standing Delta Company up, it was a heavy weapons company, and so they went to Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie Company and said, "You've all got to send 30, whatever the amount, plus soldiers to this new company." Well, we're all driven by self interest. So if I'm a company commander, do you think I'm going to go give them my best platoon sergeant, my best squad leaders, my best platoon leader? No, you may give them some, but the most part, you're gonna be like, okay, who can we dispose of? This is our opportunity. And that's what started to take shape. Even if it wasn't true, that's what people started to believe. So when I got over to Delta Company, it was a broken team. It was absent leadership. They had fired the platoon leader before me in combat, which is pretty rare. And so that's where I was showing up. And I got there, and guys weren't communicating. Nobody really cared who the new officer was that was going to be taking over this platoon, because they, in their minds, had already made up that it was going to be just like their last experience, because that's how we are too, right? I mean, we look for things that we can associate in our past, and then we self-justify the view that we're looking at the world through based off of those experiences. And so that's what I walked into, and quickly realized that I didn't have a lot of time on my side to try to right the ship, because we were getting asked to go back out on combat operations. Also en route there, the first sergeant of that company and four others were killed in a catastrophic
Mm.
improvised explosive device that happened right near that new forward operating base. And so I never even had the privilege of working with him. And I'm showing up literally as they're going through the grieving in the mourning and the emotions of losing folks that I didn't know very well. And so I'm coming in and you're having to really dial up the empathy because I'm the new guy and they don't want anything to do with me because they're over here upset and rightfully so. And so there was just a lot of emotion at play for me. And I quickly had to transition out of that mode of feeling sorry for myself to I needed to be there for them because of what they were experiencing. And then quickly also recognize that a lot of them were broken and had bought into we're this or we're that labels. And that's when we started revisiting how can I get all these guys adopted like I did with my last platoon by families that will care them, that will pour into them, that will love on them, that will pray for them. And so we started doing that. I started interviewing them, getting to know them, where they were from, were they married, what was their upbringing like, what were their hobbies, what sports were they interested in, what they want to do outside of the Army, all those things, and created these little bios on each one of them and then sent them back. And that's where my mom really took some ownership and initiative and started, in the community here in Mobile, getting these families adopted to the point where some of them still keep in touch to this day with those soldiers. And then we opened it up even beyond that. There's a great nonprofit that allowed it was adopted. I think it was I can't remember the name at the time, but it was essentially Adopt a Soldier. And so
Okay.
you would fill out information, and I just really was clear with what we were looking for to help first get these guys' minds right and let them know that they weren't just a statistic, that people cared about them back home and they were interested in what they're doing. Because in Afghanistan, most of the focus from the media was on Iraq. And so that was nice because we didn't have reporters following us around all the time and being a burden. But it was also difficult because most people felt a little forgotten if they didn't have loved ones and a support network back home. And so we started to generate that. And then as these guys started to get all kinds of things from socks to better sleeping bags to um, just some comfort items, we then turned the the spotlight on what all could we ask to start helping the Afghans because they'd give us humanitarian aid. It was like bags of flour and rice and beans. And as you can imagine, they're appreciative of it. But when you show up with that every time, they're kind of like, great, just throw it over here and we'll divvy it out in the village. So we started getting toys for the children and school supplies that we could give them and winter clothes because the winters are brutal there. I mean, you and I were laughing about how cold it is here, but we're sitting in our warm offices right now and have the clothing to provide for ourselves, whereas they don't. And so all that started to take shape, and you started to see this transition for those guys, and probably still one of the most rewarding, humbling, fulfilling experiences of my professional career was watching those guys start to activate, starting to do the things we were talking about earlier with recognizing the potential and the gifts that they had and building their own confidence muscle so they could start communicating, interacting not only with one another, but then also with the Afghans in the villages that we were there to work alongside. So it was a beautiful, just transformation where things started to change, and we had our own standards in Second Platoon Delta Company that we wanted to adhere to before anything else because they were higher than anything that was previously around us.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love this, and I want to backtrack a little bit and break it down. Our mutual friend Wes Lawson, who is also a previous guest of this podcast,
Yeah, had a
he
great one.
he warned me that Brad is a very humble person and that I might have to drag some things out of him because he won't brag about himself. So, but I love like the way this story unfolded, and you can hear about it in the TED Talk. But I think you talked about how your mom was sending you care packages,
Mhm.
and these like boxes of care packages would show up, and all of it was for you, and it was kind of representative of the abundance that you had grown up with in your life. And these boxes were showing up, and my sense from the TED Talk was that there was almost like kind of a sense of embarrassment, or like that there was all of this stuff coming for you and these guys weren't getting anything. And
Yes, yeah.
sort of how that sort of evolved. You can kind of delve into that a little
It,
bit.
yeah, it was, I think it was amplified because it was the winter time, and a lot of our logistical supplies deliveries kept getting delayed because of the weather, and the air would get shut down, so the rotary wing couldn't fly out to us because we were in a pretty remote location, not near any big area in Afghanistan, and so all those packages had stacked up even more so, and then when they arrived, it's not like the bird can't sit on the ground that long, so you need all hands pulling as much stuff off as fast as you can, and so now you've got an entire platoon pulling things off that all have your name on it, and so they're over there just, I mean, it's flipping the script. They're essentially serving me versus me serving them because they're pulling all these. Oh, here's another one for the lieutenant. Here's another one. Here's another one. And so as it stacked up and you looked around, it was very embarrassing. And I said, all right, well, this is all for y'all. So let's start getting into it. But I needed them to feel that more than this was something I was giving them, to had their name on it and they had ownership of it and somebody was doing it to them, not through me. And so, yeah, and Wes was a huge contributor and all that. Wes sent us amazing knives that provided for the entire platoon, which were super expensive and very, and I've still got mine today. And folks like Wes, I mean, so many friends and just people that I'd met along the way that said, we want to support y'all. What can we do? What can we do? And so I quickly realized that I needed to, one, embrace that support and be grateful for it, but then pass it to, let me tell you about Togno. Let me tell you about Chafee. Let me tell you about Sneed. Let me tell you about all these guys. Let's get them stuff. And then they started forming a relationship with them. And the only rule I had with the guys was, you will write a thank you note. Teach them about that, because it's not just, because I mean, when you spend the time and the money to go do something like that, I want to know that you at least, I'm not looking for you to acknowledge me. Just say, hey, really appreciate, we got it. Right. And so I wanted them, and they'd say, well, what do I say? I said, just introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about you and tell them thank you for sending it and for the care that they're providing for you. And what did that do? That just opened the floodgates for more, right? Because then people are like, man, I've got a connection over there and I want them to know how much we care. And so it was overwhelming. And that's when we were like, hold on, time out. Now write a note and say, can you send these things for the Afghans? Because we've got everything we need. And we're just, we could open our own bazaar over here and start selling stuff to everybody. We had so much stuff. So it was time to start giving to them. And that really was a lot of fun. And I saw when you're in some of the, most difficult, austere environments that are also violent and dangerous, being able to humanize it by giving the guys the opportunity to connect with the locals and the children, because children are the same anywhere in the world. They're mischievous, they're curious, and they're full of hope. And so it doesn't matter where you are, you can find that commonality. And for the guys, it was great, especially for the ones that were young fathers, because they got to go back to their families. Mm-hmm. And if all you've done is kick in doors and find, fix, and destroy bad guys, it's hard to put that weapon down and come back and play with your children and want to be present as a father. So that was important to me too, to make sure that we did our very best to prepare them also for one day, inevitably and hopefully, God willing, being able to go back home.
So this thing kind of goes from like you're receiving all of this abundance. You go back to mom and say, hey, like let's support these guys. Then the guys are starting to feel the love, right? This broken team starts receiving the love, and then they're starting to feel this sense of abundance. And then because they're feeling it, they now want to pass it on to the people of Afghanistan. I'm like, what was that like for you to watch that transformation of, you called like this broken team to like these people that are now experiencing abundance and wanting to pass it on?
It's incredible. I mean, it's probably one of the greatest gifts I think that we can offer is, I'll never forget when I first arrived and all that they were going through. And just when I walked into the sleeping area where we all were, how quiet it was and how people were just kind of absorbed in self with, playing on a handheld video device, listening to music, reading a magazine, taking a nap. It was really quiet. And maybe that was because of what they're going through at that moment, but then I recognized it again day over day. And as we started to make that transition, and you fast forward a few months, that little team room sleeping area was now full of energy, full of life, full of communication, full of laughter, full of joy, even in combat, because it could be, because we created the conditions for that. Because you had, I wanted to try to help everybody with, we have an on off switch, and when you put your kit on and you're ready to go and you've got a mission focus, yeah, it's not time to be screwing off and messing around.
Mhm.
But when we get back, you can't maintain that steady state for
Right.
16 months. You've got to have time to be able to laugh, joke, unwind, pull pranks, do all that stuff. And that's what we started to create and breathe life into. And so that was probably the indicator for me, was when I saw it go from just quiet, focused on self to now focused on others and interaction and laughter and things like that. You knew that we were heading in the right direction and we were well on our way, and that they could do this without me and we could be an extension of one another. So if we went into a village, I could take half the guys, and one of my squad leaders or the platoon sergeant could take half the guys, and we were going to be the same in regards to our attitude, our behavior, and our impact on the locals. And so that was really, really cool. And that was a remarkable experience to be able to look back on and say, I've got a darn good group. And we were small and mighty. I mean, like, we didn't, my light infantry airborne platoon was a lot bigger. We had probably 10 or 11 more guys. And, that's a lot more when it comes to security and posture and just assets available to you. And so we had a smaller group, and you still had guys that were going down, getting sick, or getting, rolling an ankle, or guys that were going on leave, because on a long deployment like that, they did get time away. And so, we were constantly having to kind of shuffle the deck. And another thing that often people don't think about is, when you're in combat, you're pulling security 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That isn't easy, because you're sitting there in all the worst of worst conditions, the freezing temperatures with high wind chill, snow on the ground, or the hot summer days with dust storms kicking up all around you, or hailstorms, and you're sitting there behind the gun, and you're providing protection for the rest of the team. And it's usually a minimum of 3 to 4, sometimes even more, depending on the threat, if we're picking up intelligence on anything. And so that isn't easy. And so to be able to get that group to gel like that, with all the different obligations pulling at us, was really, really just an incredible experience. It was, like I said, so humbling to see them buy in, because then they took it and ran with it.
Yes. I mean, I can only imagine. I'm also kind of want to share with listeners that there's a whole nother troop that was at play here in this experience. So you guys are the soldiers on the ground serving the country, but this whole story that we're talking about wouldn't have happened if there wasn't a whole nother band of soldiers back in the United States led by your mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I wonder if you could talk about the people that were back here, because, I just think so many of us, we look at admiration and gratitude at folks like yourself. Like, so thankful to have somebody like you serving our country, keeping us safe. But you guys also got fed by the people that were here, that were sending that abundance to you. And I just wonder if you could talk about that troop of soldiers that your mom was leading here.
Oh man, they're certainly more intimidating than us, by far, because they had the tenacity and persistence. I'm pretty sure mom had a yellow ribbon on every oak tree in the greater South at some point, just to keep awareness while everybody was going about their daily lives with what was going on overseas. Because, I mean, as you remember, when 9/11 happened, we did come together as a country, and President Bush had the highest approval rating of any president in modern day history at like 86%. But you fast forward 4 or 5 years, and it was already forgotten. people had already moved on, not the families that had been affected by 9/11 and all the soldiers and all the loved ones that we had lost, but the rest of society had. And so she was not going to allow that to fall off the radar. And the Colonial Dames Society and getting her siblings involved in South Carolina, and my dad's side of the family, scattered from Alabama to Georgia, all the way up to Chicago and Arkansas, and just all over. It just spread, and that message spread, and so she just was a force multiplier for good. And then they had a group that they had these rag dolls to love, I think was where they got the materials or the name of the group. And then these ladies would get together and they'd sew these dolls, and that was a way for them to connect and also be able to process the anxiety and the stress and the things that they were carrying. Because for loved ones back home, when we're doing our thing overseas, they don't know if we're in harm's way at that very moment or not, but they assume that we are.
Yeah.
And so they live in a constant state of kind of alert and stress that we don't understand, because we're gone and we're doing what we love doing. And so, I mean, it takes an enormous amount of resilience and grit and persistence and keeping positive thoughts. And that's how she channeled it, was by rallying groups together and doing things like sending us what we needed, getting soldiers adopted, sewing dolls to send to us so that we could hand it out to the children because they just latched on to them and just loved them with all their hearts. All those, putting yellow ribbons out, just doing whatever it took, making sure that at church, and every church, that you were on your entire platoon was on the prayer list. I mean, before we deployed, that for the first platoon I had, 3rd Platoon, Charlie Company, she and two of her best friends, who were like second moms to me, flew over to Italy where we were stationed and brought us St. Michael's medallions that had been blessed by our priest at church, at Christ Church Cathedral. And so, I mean, things like that. I mean, that's determination, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, she was unbelievably remarkable and steadfast with that all the way through. I mean, all the way through. There wasn't a day that her and my dad weren't speaking or connecting with somebody, and they were just truly. I'll be forever indebted to them and grateful for them for doing that, because it was hard. It was probably harder on them. And then eventually, my wife, as I deployed again later on, and she has our first child, and get to come home from the birth and then go back over to Afghanistan again. So I know that that's a whole different story that we'll have to save for another day. But I mean, those are the types of people and the caliber of families that we have supporting all of our soldiers and loved ones when they are in harm's way. And I mean, we just couldn't do it without them.
Yeah. And Brad, there's just this amazing abundance mindset that's central to all of that. And it's part of like you, your mom, your family, I'm sure your wife, like it's in there. And I'm just curious, like, if we just can talk for a minute about abundance itself. Is abundance something that's developed through, is it just something we're gifted with, or is it something we can develop?
I believe it's something we can develop for certain, because all these experiences we have in life shape us. And it starts at a young age. And you've got to have the ability and the awareness to make the intentional choices that will be in support of the abundance mindset versus the scarcity mindset. It is natural and it is common for us to want to be more protect what's mine and start to subscribe to a mindset of scarcity, and then self-justify it however we want to. But when you're being honest with yourself, and when you have the quiet time to truly reflect, are you doing that for you, or are you doing that for somebody else? And every experience that I've had, and I'm sure that you can relate to this too, and others that subscribe to it, when we choose on the abundance side, it is returned 10x. It is returned 10x every single time, because of the relationships and the joy in the moment that you feel, the connection that you have, the groundedness that you experience. All those things are just, they just become ingrained in it. And then I think it just catches more and more momentum for you, for any of us, and helps us recognize when are we, because we all will struggle sometimes and go back to the mindset of scarcity of, well, this person's doing this, and so this should trigger this reaction from me, or I could lose this opportunity. Well, that it's going to be okay. Now, what do you need to own in that? Are you losing the opportunity if it's from a business standpoint because you got complacent? Did you start getting a little too um, overzealous? Did you get too greedy with what you were after? Did you lose focus on what you truly were there to do and what you were called to do in the first place? So where can you own that, and what do you need to do to make it right, to go back to it? Because I mean, even going out on my own and having my own business, there have been times where, clients come and go, and you beat yourself up on it, and you're like, what could I have done different? Or, oh my gosh, and you start freaking out, I need to go do this now, instead of just saying, you know what, it's going to be okay, because I surround myself in a network of extraordinary people that genuinely want to see me be successful, and I want to see the same for them. And so it's how we start to spread that with good people helping good people, and then trying to help others become like that too. And so I hope that answered your question, but I do believe a lot of it is our environment and how we're shaped through our experiences, and then looking for it, because when we set our minds on things like that, it starts to unlock those doors and those opportunities, versus, always being a cynic about it and saying, well, it's never going to happen. Well, sure, if that's what you look for, you're 100% right. And you can justify scarcity all day long. So if you choose to live that way, I believe you'll have a life of regret when you're going to take your last breath.
Well, Brad, I mean, I love, you're the real deal. And I know that your 14 years of military experience has kind of transitioned into this business world. And I'd like, people that get to work with you are extremely lucky. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what it is that you're doing now. Who are the kinds of people that you work with? And yeah, just little update on that.
Yeah. So I've been fortunate I got to be a practitioner after I got out of the military, and went and joined 68 Ventures, which was a parent holding company here on the Gulf Coast. One of my closest friends was the founder, and he served, he was in the Marine Corps. Um, and when he got out long before I did, and he got into the real estate, home building, and kind of a lot of other services like that. And so he got so busy that he said, I love the people side, but I also am a deal chaser, and I love the next opportunity. I can't do both. Will you please come on and help me on the people performance side? And so not HR, because I certainly don't have that background, but more just, how do we help people actualize the potential that they have to be able to achieve greatness, and to be able to drive value in what they do, so that they can be the best of what they're capable of. And so that's the lane that I got to swim in, and then I got to be a practitioner in that space to try out what worked and what didn't work, because he had to reel me back a lot, because I try to bring a lot of things straight out of the military. And he said, if you try to implement this, everybody will quit. Like, you need to think of another way to go about it. And so it was great having such trust and accountability with such a close friend, to also help shape the path of the direction we wanted to go. And then we started Warrior 360, and that was our internal leadership brand, and then started getting to bring that externally. And so I work with companies from startup to Fortune 500 publicly traded groups. And the common denominator there is people. And no matter what size or complexity of the organization, you're going to have those challenges. And so I get to do one-to-one work with a lot of the leaders and emerging leaders inside these organizations. And it can be everything from working in the shipyards, doing ship repair work, which is one of my biggest groups, to renewable energies, to agriculture technology, to engineering and surveying. It's because people ask me, are you specific to one industry? And I'm not. It's agnostic, because we're talking about human performance. And unless we're just using AI all the time, and you've got people involved, then there's going to be a place for it. But get to work one-to-one, get to do a values-based curriculum workshop, starting with the journey on self-awareness, and then injecting our values, understanding how we start to master self, before we start trying to engage and lead others. And so we have a curriculum based off of that because of a great mentor of mine that also really has helped me in this, named Mark Fernandez, who I'm just so grateful for with everything he's done to help me get to where I am today. And then I'll get on stage and do keynotes from time to time. But that's, where I really enjoy is being inside the companies, building the relationships, establishing the trust, understanding how the business operates, because then that'll help me understand where some of the leader behaviors are coming from, to then be able to offer up things that I think would be most applicable to that organization.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think if you want to develop self-awareness, you want to work with somebody that's walked that path. And I have to believe that in your time in the military, you developed some self-awareness.
And you can go ask my wife's my best. She gives me plenty of feedback too. So I still have that right there.
I
And
love
she's
it.
been great at helping me in all those areas too.
Yeah, if organizations or people want to find out more about you or learn how they can work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yes, I mean, they can find me on LinkedIn, or they can go to my website, warrior360.co. And probably the best ways, I'm pretty easy to find nowadays. But yeah, they could go to that or go to my website. And I think it's got my contact information on there, but it's just Brad at warrior360.co.
Great. Brad, for people that are inspired by your story and specifically your sense of abundance, such as myself, I'm incredibly inspired by your abundance mindset, that would like to develop a similar sense of abundance and move towards abundance and away from scarcity. Like, what are some practical things that those people can do?
I mean, I think it's being insanely curious and gravitating towards people that you see that in, and so that you can start to learn based off of the examples that they have, and then you can be modeling that on your own. But then it's just day to day. I mean, I believe in, until we're conditioned and form those new effective habits. If you've got to put reminders out there to just every day write a letter of gratitude to somebody that's impacted your life. And I think what you do is wonderful, because you get to connect with so many different people that inspire you and inspire your listeners, your audience. And so um, little things like that, but having a simple list to just keep it top of mind and remind yourself of what are the things I want to do, what are the things I want to be known for, and how I can recognize that in others is really, I think, a great place to start. And then you'll start to find momentum or a gravitational pull, not only towards others, but towards the things that you find a lot of fulfillment in doing. That's kind of the do good, feel good model. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, it is all still, um, any of these things that we do, you could say, well, there's a selfish component to it because it makes you feel good too. And I think, depending on what's your intent and how you're deploying that, then I'm okay with it. And I think we should be, because we're trying to impact others in a positive way. But the opportunity to mentor as well. I mean, we're getting to the point where we don't feel old, but we've been around for a little while, and there's a lot of guys and gals that are entering the workforce and have no idea what they want to do, and they probably, on the outside image, are trying to portray confidence and conviction and what it is, but just being real with them and letting them know some of your story so that they can lean on you for questions, for counsel, for advice, or just for a listening ear. And I think that means so much to folks, and I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to do that. And often it'll be even with early morning workouts, getting some of these folks that I've gotten close with come work out with me, and then just listen to what's going on in their world and anything I can do to help them. And that, what a great way to start your day. I mean, you get to exercise and you get to be around somebody you care about and hopefully can help, and then it just starts to build from there. But I hope that answers your question. I think you just start small. Don't try to do too much, but I love the ability to bookend your day with the positives. No matter what happens, we're gonna start it, and we're gonna finish it with things that center us back in who we need to be, because then that's going to transition into getting better sleep and waking up with a clearer thought of who we are tomorrow.
Brad, you're an incredible inspiration. You've lived this very purposeful life, and it shows. I mean, I'm incredibly impressed. I feel honored to just be on this call with you right now. And I just know that at some point, Hollywood is going to pick up on your story and they're going to want to make a movie about your journey. And I want to know, when they do, who's going to be the Hollywood actor that's going to play you in your movie?
Well, I'm glad that you warned me on this question because I would totally have botched it, and certainly had plenty of feedback from the family. One show that I watched recently and really enjoyed was Limitless. In that what's the Australian actor's
Yeah, with
name?
Thor.
Yeah,
Chris
not that
Hemsworth. Yeah.
not that I look anything like that guy,
Yeah.
and so, but I did like what he stood for, and so
Yeah.
I thought he's a good one, but
Chris Hemsworth.
he'd have to lose a lot of muscle mass and put on a lot of fat to play me.
I love it. That's awesome. He's cool, man. I like him. What's your movie going to be called?
We're doing a conference in January, and I love the name of it and the theme. And we started this last year, and it really had such success that we're just running with it, and we're kind of changing up how we run it each year with some of the different topics under it. But I love the theme of chasing greatness, so I like that as a good one.
Nice. Chasing Greatness, starring Chris Hemsworth, and I'm definitely going to see that movie. It's going to be great. I can't wait to see it. Brad, thank you so much for taking some time to spend with me today. This was such a great conversation. And for those listening, I hope you've been inspired as much as I have. I hope Brad's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thank you for listening. Brad, thank you so much for being here.
You got it. Thank you, Scott.